The sun was just beginning to spill golden light over the quiet suburb of Fairmont Hills when it all began. Along the broad sidewalk, just a stone's throw from Lincoln Middle School, a young girl named Nia Coleman stood patiently, her backpack dangling loosely off one shoulder. She was 13 years old, a soft-spoken, bright-eyed girl who carried herself with the quiet dignity her father had instilled in her from the earliest days of her life. Nia had always been the type to stay out of trouble, the kind of student teachers adored and classmates quietly admired even if they didn't always understand her. Raised by a man who wore his service to his country like a second skin, Nia had been taught three things above all: speak with respect, listen before you react, and never, ever let someone else's cruelty steal your calm. But that morning, the world she had learned to navigate with patience and kindness would test her far beyond what she had ever faced before. After spending an extra hour at school helping her literature teacher organize and catalog a new shipment of books, a favor she had eagerly agreed to, Nia found herself alone by the main gate. Most students had already been picked up or walked home, and the campus was now almost eerily still. She stood near the low brick wall, clutching the strap of her backpack and scanning the street for her father's familiar black SUV. The soft rumble of a car engine broke the silence. A patrol cruiser, gleaming white with navy blue trim, slowed as it approached her. The driver's window rolled down, and the officer inside leaned toward her, his sunglasses reflecting the early morning light. "Hey there," the officer called out, voice casual but lined with suspicion. "What are you doing hanging around here? Where are your parents?" Nia turned toward him and offered a small, polite smile, just as her father had always told her to do when approached by anyone in uniform. "Good morning, sir," she replied with careful politeness. "I'm waiting for my dad. He's picking me up. He's just running a little late. He works with the Special Forces." The officer's lips twisted into a smirk, and a small, dismissive chuckle escaped him as he opened the door and stepped out. His boots crunched on the gravel by the curb. "Special Forces, huh? That's a new one," he said mockingly. "And I'm the King of England." Nia's smile faltered, confusion flickering across her face. "No, sir, really. He's just coming back from work." "Save it," the officer interrupted, shaking his head with an incredulous laugh. "You kids think you can say anything, and we'll just buy it. Special Forces? Right." The street was still mostly empty, save for a few parents chatting near their cars down the block, and a couple of kids playing by the swings. As the officer stepped closer, Nia instinctively tightened her grip on her backpack. "Let's go," he said gruffly, reaching for her arm. "You're coming down to the station until we figure out who you really are." Nia recoiled slightly, not out of defiance, but out of fear and disbelief. She remembered what her father always told her: stay calm, even when they don't believe you. Especially then. "Sir, please," she said, her voice still steady but tinged with urgency. "I'm not lying. My dad's almost here." But the officer didn't pause. He grabbed at the strap of her backpack, tugging it slightly, as if preparing to lead her away. The small commotion began to attract attention. Two mothers standing by their minivans turned to watch. One of them instinctively pulled out her phone, hitting record. A teenage boy leaned against his bike, his eyes wide. "I didn't do anything wrong," Nia said again, her voice softer now. "Please just wait." "That's what they all say," the officer barked. "No ID, no guardian, lying to a police officer. That's enough for me." It was at that exact moment that a black SUV came roaring around the corner, tires squealing slightly as it halted across the street with precision. The door was flung open, and a man stepped out, moving with a lethal grace that commanded instant attention. He was tall, powerfully built, and wore a uniform that still bore the dust and sweat of service. The insignia on his chest gleamed in the morning sun, an eagle clutching arrows and a shield, the unmistakable emblem of the U.S. Special Forces. The officer froze, one hand still loosely gripping Nia's backpack strap. "Excuse me, officer," the man said in a deep, even voice that carried effortlessly across the street. "That's my daughter you're laying hands on." The officer's posture stiffened. He dropped the strap immediately, stepping back as if realizing, too late, that he had made a grave mistake. Who are you?" the officer stammered. The man crossed the street with long, purposeful strides. His boots hit the pavement like thunder. "Name's Command Sergeant Major Marcus Coleman," he said, his voice steady but ice cold. I just got back from an active operation overseas, and I find you manhandling my daughter on the sidewalk because you couldn't be bothered to listen. The growing crowd stood still, their conversations forgotten. Every eye was on them now. I didn't know, I thought. The officer sputtered, visibly paling. You thought what? Marcus demanded, stepping protectively in front of Nia. You thought a young black girl telling you the truth was lying? You thought dragging a child to the station without any cause was acceptable? The officer opened his mouth, but found no words that could excuse his behavior. Marcus turned to his daughter, crouching slightly so that he could look her in the eye. Are you all right, baby girl? Nia nodded, but her eyes were glassy. I tried to tell him, Daddy. I tried to stay calm like you said. Marcus's face softened. He brushed a hand gently across her braids. You did everything right. I'm proud of you. Straightening, Marcus faced the officer again, his jaw clenched. Let me explain something to you, he said, voice low but firm. It doesn't matter if you didn't mean harm. Harm was done. You treated my daughter like a suspect, not a child. You decided what she was based on nothing but the color of her skin. The officer shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware now of the dozens of phones recording, the silent judgment from every direction. I'm sorry, the officer finally mumbled, but it sounded hollow. Sorry doesn't erase trauma, Marcus replied sharply. Sorry doesn't undo the lesson you taught every kid watching this. That being innocent isn't always enough if you don't look the way they expect. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Some nodded grimly. Others looked away, ashamed. Without another word, Marcus lifted Nia's backpack onto his own shoulder and took her hand firmly in his. Together, they turned and walked back to his SUV. As they climbed in, a woman from the crowd called out, "Thank you for standing up for her, sir." Marcus didn't answer. He simply focused on getting his daughter safely into the car, away from prying eyes, away from the ugliness that had been laid bare. Inside the vehicle, Nia buckled herself in, her hands trembling slightly. She looked over at her father, her voice small. Daddy, did I do something wrong? Marcus's heart clenched at the question. He reached across the console and squeezed her hand. No, sweetheart. You did everything right. Sometimes the world is wrong. Not you. They sat there for a moment in the quiet hum of the car, the early morning sun washing them both in a soft, forgiving light. This, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion, this is why we stand tall. This is why we never let ignorance or hate make us small. You're my little warrior, Nia. Never forget that. A tear slid down Nia's cheek, but she smiled too. For all the humiliation, for all the fear she had just endured, she knew, truly knew, that she was not alone. She was never alone. And outside, in the street that had just witnessed a small piece of truth laid bare, the world seemed, for just a moment, to pause and reconsider itself. Because respect should never have to be earned. Because dignity is not negotiable. Because truth doesn't depend on whether someone chooses to believe it. And because a child's word should always, always be worth hearing.